But there's no need for a analog Y-split cable today, seeing as though we're using a digital console, which is handy because we can basically have whatever input, whatever source on whatever channel on the mixing console, and we can duplicate. Okay, I said at the start that what I had done before I started this little film is I had idented the front of house PA with pink noise and also the monitor wedges. I'm just going to redo the monitor wedges now, just to be diligent, because that is obviously the first step once you've actually put boxes in approximately the right place and patched stuff in. So you'll already have found out that where the tone generator is, where the oscillator is on different mixers varies. Quite often it's under OSC/TB or whatever. I just happen to know on this particular Yamaha console, it's under utility. On some Yamaha consoles, M7CL, or if you recall when we went to the Ritz, the monitor console there is a Yamaha, and the oscillator in that particular case is under the monitoring tab. So hey, even manufacturers can't be consistent between different models of console. Any road, it's under utility, and you can route your tone wherever you want. So I'm going to switch on the oscillator, and it's already routed to auxiliary 8, which happens to be center wedge, the left of the center pair of wedges. And all I want to do initially is just check that my patching is cool, which it is. Now, I don't know whether you can tell just listening from here that actually there is a difference in sound between those two wedges by playing pink, and that is audible by playing your pink noise through. Pink noise is great, not just for identing wedges to make sure that you're sending, where you're sending signal to is where you intended to send signal to, but more than that, pink noise is great for sonically comparing one monitor wedge to another, or one loudspeaker box to another. Always surprises me how two of the same thing, monitor wedge or loudspeaker box, can sound so different when you feed it with a broadband identical source signal. I think, just from having a quick listen there behind the front of house desk, that one of those two center pairs sounds different to the other. Oh, hang on, they both sound different. There's a difference between those center pair wedges. The only way to really tell what that difference is going to be, well, to either stand on stage and listen to them, or what I'd rather do is I'm just going to go and turn them round so I can stand front of house and listen over here, and therefore I can switch the oscillator between the auxiliary that corresponds to the one on that side, and then the auxiliary that corresponds to the one on the other side. I should point out, by the way, I'm not linking my center pair of wedges in this case, and I'm doing that for a particular artistic requirement that I've been given from the band, basically. Sometimes linking a center pair of wedges, as is the case default in the venue at SSR, that can work. But in this case, I'm actually doing a stereo mix for this center vocal lead singer, and I'm putting a bit of a different program in this wedge to this of the center pair. Incidentally, I quite like working like that, because if you send coherent, that is exactly the same source, exactly the same mix to that side of the center pair of wedges as that side, then the cancellations that you get by being closer to one of the wedges as opposed to the other are exacerbated. They're really obvious because it's the exact same thing from there and there. Whereas if you can use that center pair of wedges to basically build a stereo mix for your lead vocalist and selectively put something slightly different in one side than the other. Incidentally, his vocal is going to be the same in both the left and the right. It's just he has a particular requirement. For example, he just wants to hear the stage right guitar in his right wedge. That's something I just know from what's been required. But just generally speaking, that can be a good approach because it gets around that problem of same source from two different loudspeakers, but which are a different distance away from your ears, which can cause problems, particularly at the low frequency end of things with cancellation if your lead vocalist moves a little bit closer to one monitor wedge than the other. Anyway, I'm going to turn those monitor wedges around and we're going to go on, we're going to listen from front of house to actually see whether those two monitor wedges in the middle sound the same. I should point out as well that these are actively amplified loudspeaker boxes. The crossover is all built within it. The amplifier is within it. They are not the world's most premier monitor wedge, ain't these, and we've got a reasonably nice PA on this job, the D&B Wise, but monitor wedge wise, you know, it's nothing fancy going on here in particular. In fact, some people use these particular box on a pole, you know, for a front of house system, you know, for a sort of small-ish job. Nevertheless, for the particular price of this job and for what's going on here, totally appropriate. Can get enough SPL for the artists on stage to pitch and time with these, no problem, and a reasonably decent sounds possible. I should just quickly point out one disadvantage with actively amplified monitor wedges rather than having your amps stage side and running an L4 speak-on connector to your monitor wedges is that you've got to run electricity along the front of your stage. These are only 13 amp IEC cables. Nevertheless, running electricity along the front of the stage, not really what I like to do when it comes to amplifiers. You usually have to put a power drop front and center for guitar pedals. But for amplifiers, effectively, well, in this case, 4 amplifiers across the front of the stage. Certainly bad for outdoors. Been near stung with that numerous times with an outdoor stage, and the lip of the stage is pretty much beyond the canopy, and precipitation comes in, and yeah, so one to be aware of. But for kind of, you know, lower budget stuff, it's quite often the case that an active wedge seems to get used. Any road, I didn't come over here to talk about that. What I did walk over here to do was turn these round and point them towards front of house. And ideally, if I can get these real close to each other, then when I listen, I should just be able to really clearly compare whether this one sounds like this one. And that's exactly what I want to do. And whether these were active or passive boxes, I would do the same thing. Tone. Not need to go crazy with the level of the tone, but probably a little bit more than that would be helpful. So, actually, they sound reasonably similar. You're never going to get it two different loudspeakers to sound exactly the same, or two different amplifiers and loudspeaker systems to sound the same. That's not too bad. Okay, so to check the polarity of your monitor wedges, we're actually checking the polarity here, not the phase. There is a there's a difference between polarity and phase, which we'll look at in a separate video. Let's not get bogged down there right now. All we're checking is that that driver is moving forward at the same time as that driver, is all. Good way to do that, if you're doing monitors from front of house, turn the wedges round. In this case, these are actively amplified loudspeakers that can also be used as monitor wedges, should you want to. Turn them around and just basically listen to two loudspeakers or monitor wedges in pairs, because we're talking here about relative polarity. Absolute polarities is kind of like a nothing. We're only going to notice a difference if that driver is moving forward at a different time to the other driver. Like that one's moving forward and that one's moving backwards. That is going to cause bad sound. So we're just making sure that the overall excursion is happening at the same time between these two different drivers. You can only get that by listening to two drivers at the same time, so sending signal to them at the same time. So listen in pairs. I'm just going to do this with these two centre wedges just for brevity of time, but usually how I would approach it is I would listen to that monitor wedge and that monitor wedge as a pair, so send pink noise to both of them and listen and go, and then flip the polarity of one of them and see whether that makes the sound worse. It should make, you should actually lose a load of low frequency at that point. If you do lose a load of low frequency when you flip the polarity of one of these wedges, but when they're both normal polarity, they sound right, then you're good to go in terms of polarity checking. We'll just do it on these two here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to send pink noise, the exact same pink noise source, to both of the centre pair of monitor wedges. It's really important you send the exact same source, and also that you send the exact same, or as similar as possible, level to both of the pair of monitor wedges that you are checking the relative polarity of. I'm going to send a signal to that one and then to that one, and at the same level, and then I'm going to flip the polarity of one of those signals being sent to the monitor wedges. If when I flip the polarity, that makes it sound more worse, that means that in normal polarity, the monitor wedges sound the best and are right. If I flip the polarity and we hear a distinct lack of low end, then they were right before the polarity was flipped. Therefore, they were right in the first place, and they're good to go. So that's the test. Okay, here we go. That's one of them. That's the other one. And the polarity invert so when the polarity of the signal being sent to one of those monitor wedges that we were testing as a pair, doesn't matter which one, got its polarity flipped, it sounded more worse, less good, and we lost some low end. So they were out of phase when I changed the phase of one of them. So they were out of polarity when I changed the polarity of one of them. Therefore, they were right in the first place, which is great. It means we can voice up. All right, then. We can get to the voicing. I should point out that at this point that I would normally use this microphone. It's going to be the lead vocal microphone when we get to show. I would normally use it from front of house to voice up the front of house first. I actually did that just off camera to keep this footage as to the point as possible, because really focusing on monitor wedge voicing really here. So, but be aware, now would be a good time to voice up the front of house using the same mic. That done though, we can push forward to the monitor wedges.